So the appraisal is based off of the portfolio. So we're buying it. We're buying 56 units. Here's the cash flow. The appraisal is based off of the portfolio. We're doing a portfolio loan that's spreading all of them. It's only one appraisal, and then we ask for partial releases. And so then when they do the appraisal, we then agree on a payoff by property, which is normally based off of cash flow to stay on the right side of debt service coverage ratios and everything else. But I mean, the genius part about it, or the thing that we like, is a lot of times they put less values on the twos, threes, and fours than they should, because it's based off of a debt service coverage ratio, because that's the way the appraisal is done. And so then the majority of my debt is actually sitting on the good properties I plan to keep. I have very little debt on the little properties because they don't have good debt service coverage ratio. So when I go to sell them, I end up unlocking a lot more equity out of the smaller loser buildings because of the way that we set up the debt.
Hey, what's up, all my real estate peeps? This is Brian Lucier from BHB Group LLC, here with another episode of the Why Not Real Estate Podcast. And today we have a special guest. We've been seeing each other in our markets for the past couple of years. I'll tell you who he is in just a second, but he is the proud founder of Candor Realty. This gentleman has decades of experience in real estate, investment, insurance. We're going to hear his story tonight, how he transitioned from a W-2 employee at a Fortune 100 company in accounting and finance leadership roles to embrace real estate as a full-time investor as of 2019. So for a very short while, you're going to hear his amazing and remarkable story, witnessing his tremendous growth from 29 units his first year in 2019 to now in 2023, over 550 plus units. This is all based on his team. He trains, he teaches, he coaches. I've seen him in all the different circles of real estate and investing. Candor Realty, it's not just a real estate company. They're striving to be a one-stop real estate solution. So remember that. They offer in-house property management, a dedicated leasing team, expert construction management. That is a huge bonus. And then they have strong relationships with local vendors, services, servicing all types of aspects of real estate. This gentleman has two things he's absolutely passionate about in this world: his family and his clients. When you choose to work with Candor Realty, you become a part of the family. Rest assured, there'll be no other need for any other team member once you embark with Candor Real Estate, their journey together. So, ladies and gentlemen, here on the podcast, the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the one and only Mr. Jon Bombaci of Candor Realty. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for the introduction. That was awesome.
Yeah, another 5 hours, and I think I would have been able to fit in all of your allocates, but we'll stop there and take some time for the show to actually dig in and find out a little bit more about you. So, Jon, I think this is our first time actually meeting face to face. I've been seeing your name all over the place. A lot of the guests on the show, you've mentored them. I think it was Andrew Freed who said you have a goal and mission to make 1,000 people multimillionaires. Do I have that right? Is it 1,000 or 10,000?
Yeah, what 1,000 millionaires is kind of the goal, and we're on our way, but we have a long way to go.
Jon, I'm going to ask for you to adjust your mic a little bit closer to yourself, or maybe turn it up a little bit so we can get a really good recording tonight. That's perfect. So in your intro, it said a little bit about working at that Fortune 100 company. The first question I always ask a guest on the show: tell us a little bit about your background before you started to invest in real estate, and what did that look like?
Yeah, so I guess my background is I started in real estate, right? So without really thinking about it. So I graduated college in 2010, and I was on the finance mission. I got a good job with a good Fortune 100 company in Hartford, Connecticut, where I was growing up. And I didn't want to rent. And so I decided I was going to go out and buy. I was going to buy a single family just like everybody else, but I had too much debt and the bank wouldn't give me a loan. So the bank gave me a loan for $100,000. And I went and I looked at some really shitty condos for $100,000 in Connecticut. They do exist, but they're really bad. And then someone told me, my grandmother, who, you know, was a small time real estate investor. She owned like 10 units, told me like, hey, why don't you try to buy a multifamily? The bank will let you buy a multifamily because it makes money. And so I went and I asked the bank if I could buy a 3-family, and they said, yeah, you can buy a 3-family. And so then when I looked at 3 families and the vacant unit was nicer than all the crappy condos I was looking at, and the bank said I could buy it. And so that was my entry into real estate, where I had my offer letter from my W-2 job. I actually hadn't started the job yet. And I was buying my first 3-family because I needed a place to live in order to relocate down to Connecticut. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I worked in insurance for 5 years, didn't buy another piece of real estate for 5 years. But the 2 extra rents in that 3-family actually paid 100% of my mortgage, my taxes, my insurance, and my carrying costs. And so I lived for free in a 3-family. We now call that house hacking. I had no idea what house hacking was. I hadn't discovered bigger pockets yet. I hadn't discovered any of that. I was just doing what I could do to not rent. I paid off a lot of debt, and then I kind of moved on. And then I didn't buy anything else until I moved back up to Massachusetts 5 years later.
So I think you had mentioned it was your grandmother who owned 10 units. She was
10 units, a couple of single families, a couple duplexes, all in town. Nothing major, but like, you know, small time landlord.
So even as a small time landlord, was she much of an influence to you growing up? I mean, you probably saw her out in the peripherals as a landlord, but did you ever sit down? I don't know if you called her grandma or meme or whatever you may have called it. Probably grandma.
We called her Graham.
Nana and Nunu were my Italian grandma and grandpas.
My great grandmother was Nana. Yeah.
Nana. So did you ever sit down with Nana, and did she kind of like tell you stories that may have piqued your interest, or did this happen when you were trying to buy the house? I guess the question is, were there other influences in your life that may have led you to real estate? And tell us the story of your grandmother's influence.
Yeah, so my grandmother was a huge influence. So I spent every summer with her ever since I was a kid. So I would get out of school and I would go live with my grandmother every summer. And every day she would give us math exercises every summer long. So like, you know, there was an hour every day of homework, even in the middle of the summer. And so she was a big influence. And a lot of it was math, a lot of it was money, a lot of it was, you know, financial independence, like without really using that word, because that really wasn't the word, but it was all about like financial stability. By the time I was, you know, 12 or 13, I was helping her record her books every month. I was helping her do those types of things. So like I was very much like in the loop with that. It was always very interesting. She was a big influence for me from that standpoint. But I mean, she worked at the public library. She was a teacher. She worked at the public library, like, and she just bought real estate when she had extra funds. It was just kind of, you know, the Great Depression era mentality, where it was, you know, scarcity mindset. We don't like debt. We don't like credit cards. We don't like mortgages. So she would save up money and she would go buy a duplex. And by the time I was a kid, she had stopped buying. She was selling stuff at that time. But she was the wealthiest person I knew. You know, she probably had a net worth of like, you know, $1 or $2 million. She was the wealthiest person in my family. And she had done most of that just by working as a librarian at the public library.
And this was like 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, she passed away 5 years ago, and she was retired like ever since I was a kid. So you know, so early 2000s is when she retired in her 60s.
Okay, so I'm just doing the math here. So $2 million 20 years ago was probably equivalent of 5 to 6 today, or even better.
Yeah.
So she did really well as a librarian / teacher. Man, I would have loved
Exactly.
to have heard her story. You know, how did she figure that out? So here's your grandma on the scene. She's making you do math. God love her. I mean, that is so smart to get the kids involved at an early age. I mean, my son, I got him involved in an early age. And when he got old enough, he moved all the way to the West Coast, so he didn't have to change toilets with me anymore. So, but now he's the financial advisor on BHB Group, so he's come full circle. He's found his niche. So were there any other influences as you were growing up that maybe would have triggered that switch that real estate probably could have been an answer or a possible solution?
I mean, so the only other influence was a negative influence. And that was my grandmother basically did the same thing with my mother. And so my mother and my father, the first house they bought was a 3-family. They never bought any other investment property. It was just a 3-family. And they would spend, weekends painting apartments, turning apartments. It was always like an argument in the family about the 3-family on Pearl Street. Growing up, it was always like a drain on all that. And I think they ended up selling it for a little bit more than they paid for it after owning it for 15 years. Like, it was a bad experience. And so my father was very much against landlording and all that, because they had essentially the opposite experience as I had buying that 3-family, which, you could argue is market timing or not growing past that first building, right? Like, if you only own one building, you remember all the bad times. If you own 10 buildings, you kind of understand there are going to be bad times. And I think it was just, if you own one building, you either had a great experience or a bad experience, but there's not really an in between, and they had a bad experience.
So grandma has 10, she makes it work. Mom and dad had one multifamily?
One 3-family, so yeah, 3 doors. And then they went and they bought the single family new construction house, and the 3-family ended up being like a problem.
Wow. Sorry to hear that. Well,
I mean, we've been in the industry long enough that, like, there's 2 sides of every coin. It doesn't always work everywhere. But I mean, the thing about real estate, and the thing that I resonate with real estate back to insurance, is it's the law of large numbers. If you buy 10 properties and you know how to do your underwriting, you know how to do your deal, some of those 10 properties, 1, 2, 3 are going to be losers. 1, 2, 3 of them are going to be winners, and then you have the rest that are going to be medians. And if you buy one property, maybe you get a loser, maybe you get a winner. If you buy 100 properties, statistically speaking, you're going to have 20 losers and 20 winners. But like, the risk in real estate is you don't have enough for the law of large numbers to come into a play.
The term I've learned is economy of scale. So
yep.
If you've got one roof with 20 units under it, you only have to fix one roof. If you've got 10 duplexes, you got to fix 10 roofs. So yeah, that can bury you, but the rent would be the same, but the expense is just different. So yeah, I'll drill down to that later. But okay, so we've got the influences set up there. I love that there's 2 sides of that story. I can't even imagine what your parents may have been going through. It could have been operations. It could have been, not seeing eye to eye on how to manage that property. I'm not sure, and it's not my goal and ambition right now to point out what could have gone wrong there. So I want to put the spotlight back on you.
I mean, I can tell you.
Well, I think that would be valuable, but I didn't want to ask because they are your parents, and I want to respect that.
No, but I mean, honestly, I have the same weakness. And I recognize that early on. And I think, I solve for it a different way, which I'm sure we can get into. But I mean, their problem was, my mom is very empathetic. She's awesome. I love my mom. But she always had a personal relationships with the tenants. And, that can work out really well when you have good tenants and they're paying their rent. But if something goes wrong, that relationship goes south. And so, she had a personal relationship, all the tenants, when they moved in, they had a lot of trouble with the evictions, with people stop paying and things like that. And it wasn't, it was being run as extra money. It wasn't being run as a business. And I'm the same way. I'm too soft on my tenants. I realized that very early with my 3-family. Is if someone asked me, hey, I'm thinking about getting a dog, like, I had a hard time saying no to something that I know I should say no to. And so as I grew, I ended up putting a property management company between me and my tenants to try to keep me out of my weakness. My weakness is I like to say yes. My weakness is I like to please people. And that's That's a strength if I use it in the right way. That's a weakness if I let it run my business.
There's so many golden nuggets you said in there. Not keeping it too personal with the tenants. I mean, I love my tenants. I'll bend over backwards for them because they allow me to live the lifestyle I live. I'll do anything for them. However, there's that boundary that I'm going to keep it as a business. And if the rent's not paid, then, I say this to my team all the time, I keep a mason jar on my desk. And sometimes I take my heart out of my chest, put it in the mason jar, do my job to the best of my ability. And then when it's done and completed, I'll take my heart and put it back in my chest and start pumping blood in my veins again. Because, yeah, I've been there. I've been a tenant. I've missed rent payments myself. I understand it. But at the same time, you've got mortgage, rent, insurance, water bills, utilities, taxes. I mean, the list goes on and on. That some tenants just think, well, you're the landlord, you're made of money because you bought this place, and don't realize that you're on the hook for a much higher responsibility than just their rent. So the personal aspect to the business aspect, and then you mentioned having a buffer of a property management company. We did that a long, long time ago because same problem. I wanted to help people and do whatever I could, but I still had to make the mortgage payment. So a scenario I've done in the past is, John, you're a wonderful tenant. Mr. Bombaci, I'd let you live here for free if I could, but I'm responsible to the landlord. So can you and I work out an arrangement or an agreement? I'll present it to the landlord. And if they do that, then we can move forward and not have to do an eviction or whatever. So yeah, having that third party manager involved in your real estate, or even if it's your own company, it's really smart to do that. So personal, keep it like a business, have a property management company. So I think that's a really great segue into my next question here, because you started with your 3 family, and then it was maybe 3, 4, 5 years before you pulled the trigger to do something else. So tell me what that transition, that story looked like from purchasing that first 3 family up to 2023, where you're almost at 600 doors. I want to get an idea of the story of how that scaled.
Yeah. So I guess the next thing that happened was we moved to Massachusetts. We bought a 2-family. I met my wife. She became my fiance. And I was commuting into downtown Boston doing the insurance thing, making good income driving to Boston. I would leave at 6. I'd get home at 6, and that was a normal day. But that was life for a while there. And then my dad actually died early. He had cancer. And so when he passed away, that was kind of an awakening. That was kind of like a life altering experience. And I spent 3 hours on the bus getting to Boston one day, and I was like, I can't do this for 40 years. And so started looking at my finances. I was frugal. I was saving. Grandma taught me well. And I was on the path to financial independence and retiring early, by 45. And then I started looking at this real estate thing that I was doing on the side by accident. And I started listening to Bigger Pockets. I started getting into Mr. Money Mustache and Early Retirement Extreme and all these financial independence real estate type podcasts on my 3-hour commute. And so I looked at my finances and said, hey, if I throw caution to the wind and I buy real estate aggressively, I could retire in 3 years. And that's what we did. I went out and we bought 29 units in northern New Hampshire, a small city, Littleton, New Hampshire, in 18 months. And I had no intention of quitting my job when I started that. And when we closed on the last 12 unit up there, we bought a 5, a 7, and a 12. The day I closed on the 12 unit is the day I put in my 2 weeks notice. I told my boss what I was doing, and that was the last day I worked in corporate. They walked me out of the building that day, and I've been in real estate full time ever since. I learned early on that I have my strengths and I have my weaknesses, and in corporate, you always try to develop your weaknesses. That was always the conversation. What are your 3 big strengths? What are your 3 big weaknesses? What are you going to do to improve your weaknesses? And in real estate, I kind of learned I don't need to work on my weaknesses. I need to find other people to work with that have strengths where my weaknesses are, and I just need to focus on the stuff that I'm good at. And so I started learning how to partner with people, did a couple JVs to buy some of the early properties. And then it just became all about like team building. I work with different people depending on the deal, making sure I'm bringing in the right partner, bringing in a real estate attorney if I have a deal that involves a lot of complex legal issues, making sure I'm bringing in the right partner into the right deal. And so then that way, any property I can walk, it's a deal for somebody. It might not be for me, might be a deal for me and the right group of partners, but being able to identify what the strengths are that you need at the table for the deal was kind of our bread and butter, kind of like the secret sauce. And that's allowed us to scale rather quickly. I only own a few units by myself. I learned how to partner early. Learning to partner in real estate has been game changing for me. And it makes it so it's not so hard. And I don't think I'll ever buy a property by myself again. Not because I can't, but because there's things I'm good at. And if I can focus on the stuff I'm good at and give the stuff I'm not good at to someone else that is good at it, it makes the whole experience a lot better. Before I sold the units I owned up in Littleton 2 years ago or last year, I was spending more time managing those 24 units that I owned by myself than I was managing a 132 unit complex that I owned with 3 other people. And I wasn't really spending more time, but it felt like it because I was doing the things I enjoyed and the things I hated. On the big building, I was able to focus on the things I enjoyed. And so it didn't feel like work. I didn't have to do things I didn't want to do. And that's the cool thing about real estate. That's the cool thing about being an entrepreneur is you can protect your time and focus on the things you want. But you kind of have to learn to say, you don't have to learn to say no, I guess, because I'm pretty bad at saying no, but you have to learn to bring the right people into the deal so you can work on the stuff that you enjoy.
So 24 units, started to JV, started to partner. That was 2019, 2021, 22, 23. So in 5 years, the math on that, let's see, that's 5 times 4, that's 2,000% growth over 5 years. That's
yeah. When you say it like that, yeah, that's a lot.
That's why I enjoy the show. And I start like peeling back some of these numbers to a gentleman like yourself. It's like, I get it. There's the gap in the gain. And I go through the struggle all the time. That gap is where you want to be to. And you say, oh, no, I'm not there yet. And then that gain is everything that you've achieved to get to that point. And when somebody says today, like in 5 years, you had 2,000% growth, it's like, whoa, wow, that's a real number.
It doesn't feel like it.
Right, because you had to take every step. It wasn't like you were here and then you jumped ahead 5 years and say, wow, look at all that. I mean, you had every wart, toad, and trial and tribulation in between. So I want to break down some of the numbers here because this is the part of the show I love doing, right? So 3 units, 24 units. Give me numbers on your next deals because I see a pattern mostly with investors. Like if they buy a 2-family, the next will be a 4, and then the next will be an 8, and then they'll do a 16, and then a 32. I think Brandon Turner calls that the stack method or something like that. What did your stack method look like to get up to 550 plus?
Oh, geez. So it was the 3, and then the 24 was a 5, a 7, and a 12, all different owners. Okay. Then in Lowell, we bought 12 units off of one group. That was a 9 and a 3 together. And then we actually bought a portfolio in Fitchburg and Leominster, which was 50 units, Bingo. Which was a lot at the time. Yeah, it was like 10 buildings, like 50 units. And then we bought another portfolio in Fitchburg, Leominster, which was a little bit bigger. I think it was probably more like 65 units. And then the next big one was we did a syndication in Lowell, which was like 132 unit site property. And that was kind of our entry into syndication, our entry into raising funds in a significant way. We sold that one in about 16 months. And then since then, the rest of the deals actually have been smaller than 132. We kind of found out that was kind of better to be lucky than good situation where we're not prepared to compete with the REITs at the 100+ unit buildings. That's not our strength yet. So now most of our deals kind of fall somewhere between 40 and 80 units, somewhere between $5 and $15 million is kind of our target at the moment. That big one we did in Lowell was a $20 million purchase, and I'm glad we did it. We made a lot of money. Our investors were very, very happy. But we definitely it was definitely one of those better to be lucky than good situations. And I'm not sure we could repeat that, you know, over and over again, given the competition at that scale.
So you revealed exactly what I was looking for. And I want to mirror it back to you because I just love this show so much. I hear these stories and it just confirms all the way along that investing in multifamily, I feel, is the best asset class out there of all investment. But just to roll it back a little bit, you started with that smaller portfolio yourself, the 5, 7, 12, the 24 units plus the 3 that got you up to the 27, the 12 unit, which was a 9 and 3. So your very next deal, you're right in that sweet spot, and then bam, you jumped that level up to the 50 and 65. So that's that, like, your mind was mentally prepared that you could do that. And then after doing the 50 and the 65, your mind was mentally prepared. You were in that state. That 132 was like, yeah, we could do this. And then after that 132, you identified a niche and a sweet spot that is your gravy, bread and butter all day long. If you did nothing else but $5 to $15 million deals, 40 to 80, I mean, grandma would be proud of you. So
I hope so.
So do you make your kids do math projects during the summer?
Not yet. They're 2 and 4, but we should start doing that.
Okay, 2 and 4, 2 and 4. I think it was Jay Scott or his wife on one of the Bigger Pockets podcast. His kids had a lemonade stand, and it wasn't just that you made $1 on a cup of lemonade, but you had your sugar, your lemons, your advertising. You had to, like, how much of that dollar was part of your operations, how much was your net profit. And then from that, it was a lemonade stand, but it taught him the whole cycle of operations of business. So yeah, there's a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but when I was a kid, my dad would love to play Monopoly with us, and no, he would never let us win. That was not his thing. So I'm going to win, and I'm going to show you why I won. But what always bothered me, like if you bought Ventura Gardens or Marvin Gardens, whatever it was, you would pay $320 for it, and you get this little cute little deed, right? And then when you land on someone's Park Place and they got 5 hotels and you got to mortgage everything, you could only get like $270 for your $320 property. And that, I would get so upset. I said, Dad, why is that? He says, try to explain it to me, but it didn't make sense to me until I actually bought a property. That's your down payment. Nobody lets you refinance out 100%. You got to keep that 20, 25, 30% in. You got to have some skin in the game. My son calls it blood in the game because it's real, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, maybe it's a game of risk. Maybe it's the rat race, Robert Kiyosaki. Maybe it's Monopoly, but maybe it's a lemonade stand. But I'm going to challenge you as your kids get older. Teach them that value that your grandma taught you, and don't make them change toilets. That'll turn them off. So, okay, so here we are.
Good to know. I'll keep that in mind.
Well, you're much younger than me. My kids are probably your age at this point. So, yeah, take what is valuable, discard what is not, and love your kids. So there's your picture. So I think this brings you from 2019 up to 2023. Before, let's see. Yeah, I do want to dig into one of these deals because I'm sure one of these is your flagship that was like your bread and butter property that you go to bed smiling if you think about. But before I go there, I'm going to ask another question. Now, this question is morphed into 2 parts. I used to just ask people, in your investing career, and I'm going to say 10 years for you because it was your first one. Then you waited 5 years, came up to mass, and then 5 years later had your 2000% growth spurt. So in your 10 years, right, what advice would you have given to yourself back when you were starting? That's the first part of the question. And then the second part of the question is, what advice would you give to someone starting out today? Take it away, Jon.
Yeah. So if I was first starting, so I mean, I guess we had great growth. I guess my mistake, or I didn't realize it early on, is I started investing in real estate because it solved a problem, which was housing for me. I didn't really do it intentionally. I look at people that we help today, and they're very intentional about it. They can house hack 5 properties in 5 years with 3.5%, 5% down, and that's incredible. So I mean, I wish, obviously, like everybody, I wish I knew what I know now then, because I took a lot of time off, and then I went from 0 to 60 very quickly, when I definitely could have done it slower and more methodically, and had it be more intentional. So I mean, I wish when I first started buying, that I the next year I bought another one, the next year I bought another one. Like, instead of jumping so quickly, I wish I was doing it sporadically, like constantly throughout my process. I think my growth really came when I started third-party management. So I know you have a property management company. We have an in-house property management company. So I think, I didn't do that soon enough. I should have done that sooner, because that's not my strength. That's not what I'm good at. Like, it's okay. Like, I talk to a lot of people now, and I kind of say, hey, if you want to self-manage, that's awesome. You're going to learn a lot. But if not, hire a property management company. Like, they're invaluable. They make it so you can grow. They make it so you can focus on the things you enjoy. Some people are really good at management and should be self-managing, but I find that that's definitely the minority in the business. I feel like a lot more people would benefit from forcing themselves to grow by having a third-party manager involved. We don't do much third-party management. Almost all of ours is just in-house, but the value of having someone else manage and create that distance is massive. And I think sometimes people look at the management fee and talk themselves out of it, but like, you get a lot out of it besides just the management fee. The thing that I normally spend a lot of time with people. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to reflect so far. So for yourself, more of a gradual transition to build it up instead of 0 to 60. And then I think it was a kind of a transition into a newbie or a starter to get that. If you're good at manage it yourself, or if you're growth focused, to hire a third party. Is that kind of advice to yourself, or is that beginner advice?
I think that's kind of advice to myself, where it's like, I think that's more advice to myself, is I should have stepped out of the self-management earlier than I did. And I think that's advice that I do give that to clients, because I feel like sometimes they get stuck self-managing, and like that the whole purpose of buying multifamily is so you don't get stuck. And I feel like sometimes people forget that when they look at the management fees.
So, advice for a newbie starting out today, and I'm sure this will be good because you train and coach people to do this. So I try not to train. I try not to coach. The people that I end up coaching are people that kind of sucker me into coaching them without me realizing that I'm coaching them. Like Andrew Freed, ended up getting me to coach him, and I never realized I was coaching him. I don't think I do that, but people kind of put me in that position, which is great. So then I have a question. That was my assumption. So if you were to explain what you do to someone, how would you explain what it is that you provide? What's the value that you add?
So I provide, so we have 40 plus investor focused agents. So we have a team of real estate agents that are all investors themselves. So a lot of times when I start talking to newbies, people that are looking to enter the industry, I spend a lot of time working with them on what they're looking to buy, where they're looking to buy it, and kind of building the plan. Then I hand them over to an agent on the team to help them actually find the building. I don't do coaching. I don't do mentoring. I don't do any of that kind of stuff. But we host meetups. I think you've been a guest speaker on some of our meetups, which is awesome. And we try to bring people into the network to provide value. And then inevitably people call me when they have problems, or people join the team looking for advice. What I find is a lot of people join the team, like Andrew Freed joined our team, in order to get access to me as a mentor. But I didn't actually make that connection until he talked about it on a podcast. Because I think early on, people ask me if I do coaching or mentoring, and my answer is no, I don't. But if you ever have any problems, call or text me. I'm happy to help. And so then people on the team kind of have access to me as part of the brokerage, as part of the strategy, as part of the business. And so inevitably, I've kind of become a mentor or coach to them without necessarily knowing it. But I'm available to them when they need me, and I guess that is kind of the definition of a coach.
But it wasn't the target on the wall. It was the result from the experience of doing this.
Yeah, it was the result of trying to build the network and help people with that, 1,000 millionaires, over the course of our company. Like, that's still the goal. But the mentoring and the coaching is not a business. It's just kind of become kind of natural as part of the rest of the organization.
It kind of just happened, like, organically.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
That just reflects at so many things in life. You don't start out intending to do something, and then because you're so darn good at it, you're pedaling that bike. You never started out trying to learn how to ride a bike, but guess what? Now I can pedal, do wheelies, and ring the bell all at the same time. And you're not even thinking about it. And then somebody comes up alongside and says, "Hey, show me how to ride a bike." It's like, oh yeah, I guess I do know how to do this.
I do know how to do that. Yeah, I can't answer your question. Yeah.
So I want to. That's an infectious laugh you have, Jon. No, I like that. So the newbie advice: if you met me on the street today and I didn't know real estate from Nike shoes, what advice would you give to someone who is thinking that, hey, real estate might be interesting, but I've used this analogy before. It's like trying to describe an elephant, a blind man in a dark room trying to describe an elephant, or trying to describe the flavor of chocolate ice cream. So what advice would you give to a newbie just starting out?
So the most advice, the most of the time when I deal with a newbie, what I try to do is I try to get them to do less.
Unpack that.
And the reason I do that,
What do you mean when you say do less? I want you to unpack that.
So most of the time when I talk with a newbie, I try to nail down to them, what are they trying to accomplish in real estate? That's the first thing I ask them. What are you looking to accomplish? What are you looking to get out of this? And I do that intentionally very early. And most of the time they have a very clear picture as to what they're looking to accomplish. And then when I ask them, okay, what are you looking to buy? They have a very hard time answering that question. And the answer I always get, and I always poke a hole in it right away, is I'm looking to buy a good deal anywhere in Massachusetts. And so I say, okay, great, I have a great deal for you in Springfield. And they say, well, not Springfield. So I said, okay, so let's back up. And then we look at, where do you work? Where do you live now? Where's your family? Where's all this? And we very quickly narrow down a location. And it's just a conversation, and it's just very thing. But so many times I talk to people and they're like, I'll look anywhere. I'll look within an hour of Boston. I'll look within 2 hours of my job. And very quickly after a quick conversation, the answer is you won't. And by doing that, you're never going to be able to buy real estate, because if your area is too wide, you're going to get unfocused. You're going to get disconnected. You can't compare a 2-family in Worcester to a 2-family in Haverhill to a 2-family in Southern Mass. If you look at all 3 of them in a day, the answer is going to be, I don't want to buy any of them because I don't really know what I want now. But if I show you 5 properties in Fitchburg over the course of a weekend, I can ask you very concretely, which one do you like best? That might not be the one you put an offer on, but by looking at a very tight geography, very quickly which ones work better. And that's what I try to isolate with people, is like the hardest part about real estate is patience. The first 3 weeks, we're going to look at about houses. After that, we're just going to sit back and wait for the right house to come on. And when it comes on, you're going to know about it, and you're going to be confident, and you're going to be able to act confidently because you know what you're looking for, you know where you're looking for it, and you know what the price range is. But if I show you too many things, you're never going to make a decision, because you can't compare apples to oranges. And 2 houses in 2 different cities, even if they're right next to each other, aren't comparable to most people.
I guess this boils down to a little bit of analysis paralysis. If I'm looking at everything, I can't make a decision. Having one or two options, one option is not actually an option, is it? Having two or three options, it's like, okay, if this happened, this is what it would look like. If that happens, what would it look like? But to your point, if I'm looking at a single family house just out of Boston or a 30 unit out in Springfield, those are totally different animals. Those are different elephants in the room for sure.
So the example is if I show you three families in Leominster or Fitchburg, you'll know pretty quickly which city you like better. You'll know pretty quickly which price point you're more comfortable with. You'll know pretty quickly if off-street parking is important for you or not. And then afterwards, now we know what you're looking for. And now the hard part is waiting for what you're looking for to come on, right? The answer isn't I show you three houses, pick one, we're going to go highest and best. Like this isn't HGTV. We're not trying to do that. But the idea is if I show you enough things in a tight demographic, now we know what you're really looking for. And you're not going to know what you're looking for until we have that exercise. And then, great, I want a 3-family in Leominster because it's nicer. This is my price point. It needs to have off-street parking. Do you need a garage? Do you not need a garage? But now that we know what you're looking for, we just got to wait for it. I tell anyone that we start working with, it takes 3 to 6 months for us to find you a place. If it's less than 3 months, we did something wrong, or we didn't, or we got lucky. If it's more than 6 months, you either got unlucky or you're being unrealistic with your expectations. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to take time. You're supposed to have sleepless nights. You're supposed to freak out once or twice. That's natural. But like 3 to 6 months is the target. If it's easier than that, either you're lucky or we screwed up. If it's harder than that, you're either making it harder than it needs to be, or you got unlucky.
That is some pretty spot on. I've never heard it explained as to do less, but now that you've unpacked it, and I'm glad you did, it's very clear. I think Brandon Turner says all the time, you got to focus on that one thing. Don't say I want to do multifamily and storage and single family and wholesaling and flips. What's that one thing? And for me, that one thing is multifamily real estate all day long. So that makes sense to me. That was really good. So now we're going to dive into one of the deals of your journey there. I've got your the 27, the 12, the 50, 65, 132, and now your 40s and 80s. What would you say in your experience of investing would have been the best deal that you ever did? What kind of property was it? How did you find it? How did you finance it?
Yeah, so I'd say that the best deal I ever did was probably one of the 56 or 65 unit portfolios I bought between learning how to partner with people and then before we jumped up into syndications. And the reason why I say that is because looking back and reflecting, like that's what we're good at and that's what we're targeting going forward, because we kind of found it by happen chance, but it ends up being part of our core strategy. So basically what we like to do is we like to buy, I don't like, I need 100 units in a market to have economies of scale. So I can launch all my businesses, do construction management, do in-house property management, hire property manager, maintenance techs. That's the goal. So I like to buy anywhere between 40 and 80 unit portfolios, but I like them to be portfolios. I like it to be a mix of 2 families, 3 families, 4 families, 6 families, 8 families. And what we do is we buy the good with the bad. And then we go through and we manage it like an insurance company. I manage it like a book of business. In the first 6 to 8 months, we try to identify the winners and the losers. The goal is keep the winners, sell the losers, which makes sense. And the idea is most of the time our losers are the 2 to 4 unit buildings, not because they're bad buildings, but to the conversation you had before, where would you rather have one 20 unit building with 1 roof or 10 duplexes with 10 roofs? The small buildings tend to be the losers to scalability because there's too much to maintain over the cost per door. And what we do is we vacate an apartment, we clean it up, and we sell it off on MLS to house hackers. The same way I started my business, the same way we help other people start my business. So it kind of comes full circle where we bring all of the things together. Now I've got 100 units in the market. I've got a management company. I got a construction management company. We're doing the flips ourselves. We're doing the turns ourselves. And then we're selling it into the market we service. And we're able to put out a higher product than the other guys because we know what a house hacker wants. We know how to do the kitchen. We know how to do the bathroom. We know how to clean it up and sell it because That's our customer base on the agency side. And so that ends up being our core strategy because it feeds everything else. And then you have all these other things connecting to it. But like, if I can buy two 50-unit portfolios in New Bedford, which we're kind of working on, now I've got scalability down there. I can sell off my losers in a way that everybody benefits, and I'm able to keep the winners, and the management company is busy.
Yeah, purging the diamonds from the dogs. I mean, we did that on a smaller scale with our portfolio. We were buying a lot of 3s and 4s, 6s and 12s. And when we started to liquidate like 3 years ago, when everything was, it was the time to sell, we just like identified the dogs, put a fresh leash on it, gave it a bath, and buy this puppy in the window. And it worked out really well for us. And we kept the diamonds, we kept the larger properties. So it mirrors exactly what you're saying there. So how does one go about finding a portfolio? How did you find the deal?
So I mean, they're easier than you think. You just have to ask questions. And I think I think I think you know the answer. But I mean, the idea is someone selling a 2-family, ask them what else they own. Ask them what else is going on. And a lot of times you have landlords that own a lot of them. They want to sell. They dread the dripping them off into the market and have it spending 10 years. And so we can go to them and say, hey, I know you've got this one on the market, but you got 10 other buildings in the town. How do you feel about selling them all at once? And they understand, investors of that scale that are looking to exit, they understand that you're probably going to pay less than market value because you're taking them all. And then that tends to be the way that we kind of go through it, is if we find someone that owns a bunch of buildings that is looking to sell one of them, they're probably looking to sell all of them. They just don't know how to do it yet.
So in your 50 and 65 acquisition portfolios, is this the scenario that happened? Did you find a deal and then it blossomed?
Essentially, we put in an offer on a deal. We got to know the property management company in Fitchburg, Leominster, and they were like, oh, we're actually going to ramp up more to sell. And like, okay, tell us about that. And then we kind of got to the niche of it, and the owner was leaving the business. He had a bunch of units in the area. They're going to chop it up and sell it in portfolios. And we were kind of, first in line when that was going through. And the problem with it, and I mean, you kind of get it. If you're going to sell me 10 2-families, the cash flow sucks, right? Because that's why, you chop them up and sell them, because they're the dogs. And so if I can buy small multifamily based off of cash flow and sell it based off of comps, that's a huge difference.
Oh, wow.
And like just to break that down, right? If I have a 2-family bringing in $2,000 a month, that cash flow might say it's only worth $200,000. But now if I say, well, it's a 2-family and the 2-family across the street sold for $300,000, well, what do you think you can sell it for? And so the idea is if I can take these businesses that are trading based off of cash flow, carve off the losers and sell them based off of comps, I'm essentially changing the product and changing the way that they're valued without really doing anything other than taking an apple and telling you it's an orange.
Wow.
And investors get that, where we say, hey, you've got 50 units, it's bringing in $500,000 a year. I'll pay you $5 million for it, because that's what the cash flow does. But if I sit down and I break up the 4 units, I might be able to sell each 4 unit for $700,000. But that's not how I'm buying it, because I'm buying it in one lump sum off of an investor. We almost always finance them with local credit unions. We almost always put 25% down. We get aggressive rates and aggressive terms. No prepayment penalties. We make sure that that's all baked in there. So then that way we can kind of execute our strategy. And the banks love it because we return capital to them quickly. They get a little fee income. And they love the story of going to the board and saying, hey, they're going to sell the losers and keep the winners. So this is what the portfolio looks like today, but we'll expect 18 months from now that we're going to be sitting on all the winners.
I have to put a spotlight on what you said, because it was so golden, the cash flow and the comps. Because when you're buying from the guy or business that's selling the portfolio, they have one state of mind, that they're selling it at wholesale, because they've got this whole skid of properties that they're going to sell at once. They're going to get it done and be done with it, not have 800 people walking through 40 different properties. That makes so much sense. And then when you unpack every product on that skid, and here it is based on the comps, you're selling it to someone with a totally different state of what they see as that product. It's the exact same product, but the state of the person selling it as a portfolio and the state of a person who's buying it as probably their first house hack is a totally different property in their state of mind of what they're looking at. Wow. Wow. You said that very eloquently, Mr. Bombaci.
Not my
That was
first
good.
rodeo.
That was good. So you peeled back a little bit to the credit unions, but I'm going to unpack this here. How did you finance? Take one of these 50, 65 portfolios. That's a lot of deeds to get through an appraisal at a bank. How did you manage all that?
No, so the appraisal is based off of the portfolio. So we're buying it. We're buying 56 units. Here's the cash flow. The appraisal is based off of the portfolio. We're doing a portfolio loan that's spreading all of them. It's only one appraisal, and then we ask for partial releases. And so then when they do the appraisal, we then agree on a payoff by property, which is normally based off of cash flow to stay on the right side of debt service coverage ratios and everything else. But I mean, the genius part about it, or the thing that we like, is a lot of times they put less values on the twos, threes, and fours than they should, because it's based off of a debt service coverage ratio, because that's the way the appraisal is done. And so then the majority of my debt is actually sitting on the good properties I plan to keep. I have very little debt on the little properties because they don't have good debt service coverage ratio. So when I go to sell them, I end up unlocking a lot more equity out of the smaller loser buildings because of the way that we set up the debt.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. That the lending institution would put a lower value on the dogs, which you're going to put out on the market, that puppy in the window anyways, just reinforces the value in the equity, like you said, of the diamonds that you're keeping. Wow.
And so the appraisal is easy because it's one appraisal, and I file for partial releases, and we settle the amount per building essentially in a spreadsheet based off of the appraisal. And then we sign off on it, the bank signs off on it. And then when we get a partial release, we go back to our spreadsheet and we say, this is how much debt that was assigned to that building.
Okay, so now we have the appraisal. We know what the property's worth. The bank is on board. How do you structure the finance? This is a $5 to $15 million deal. You'd mentioned you were starting with partners, and I think this was a partner situation, and then the 132 went up to a syndication. So if it's safe to ask the question without getting the SEC on this podcast, how did you structure the debt to pull down a 50, 65 unit portfolio?
So on the smaller deals, right, where we need to raise less than $2 million, we structure them as JVs, right? So they're the person has management responsibilities. That's how you avoid the SEC conversation. They have real equity. They have all that. There might be some sort of an incentive for the manager and the property management company and the construction company that's running the job. But in actuality, the JVs have ownership and management responsibilities. And we normally raise, $2 million off of 5 to 6 people at, $250,000 to $500,000. We put our own money in as well. And then that way, like on a small raise like that, we keep it pretty niche down, and everybody has management responsibility. So it's not an equity, it's a partnership.
Sure.
On the larger stuff, if we were buying and we're buying something that we need to raise more than $2 million, then we would file the paperwork and do a syndication. And normally on those ones, we raise it, $50,000 to $100,000 at a time. Takes a little bit longer, and then we kind of piece it together with all the bells and whistles that the SEC requires in order for us to get our exception. Costs us about $20,000 to do all the legal paperwork to register a syndication the right way. And so that's why we have that $2 million cutoff, because if it's under $2 million, we feel like we can take that down in a close group. And to spend $20,000 on legal fees kind of hurts on a big portfolio that you're going to be turning quickly. If it's a much larger purchase, $10 million, a $20,000 legal fee at closing is a drop in the bucket on the closing statements.
Wow. I'm learning a lot here today. This is awesome.
No,
So
and I mean, I guess this is why some people like use me as a coach because I'm pretty honest about it. I'll tell you exactly how I did it and why I did it, and if you can repeat it, that's awesome. Congratulations. The market is so huge that like we can all win. Like we don't need to compete against each other. Like there's so much out there in Massachusetts alone that is like it's got to be an abundant mindset. And like if anyone asks me any question, I'm an open book because like if you can learn one thing that I did wrong or one thing that I did right and it makes a deal easier in the future, like why not? Like I learned from other people. I had people answer my questions when I didn't know what the heck was going on. So I it's my responsibility to kind of return the favor.
well, I love your openness on this because, I'm learning a lot on this. I've never done a portfolio. I've never heard the one appraisal. I've never heard the partial releases. I mean, that for me is gold. That's a whole nother tool in the tool belt. And tool in the tool belt, all this video, all this content you're going to have access to. So if you want to give it to your social media team and cut up sniglets and use it to do that coaching that you're not doing, you can be my guest. So and on your syndications, do you have a preference, Reg B, Reg C? And if people don't know, I'll explain what that is.
So yeah, so we always do non-accredited. So we always do private. We always do it with our internal network. We take our we take our 35 unaccredited individuals, and then any accredited individuals we want over the top is how we always raise. We never publicly market them. We always kind of keep them to our email list. One of the benefits of the whole thing, and you've been a part of it too, is when you come to one of our meetups. Now we've had a connection, we've talked, you've registered at one of our events without being solicited as someone to be part of our syndication.
Sure,
But once
sure.
you come to a meetup, now I can approach you about opportunities because you came to us first.
Well, just for the record, this is a public recording. I'm interested in your deals. I'm interested in your offers. I'm an accredited investor, so put me on your mailing list. So what you had explained about having your mailing list and all that, that would be a Reg B. Okay. So here's how I try to remember it. Regulation B is brother, right? So that could be your friends, your families, your uncle, your aunt, people that you know. Regulation C, I think of as a company. So those are going to be your accredited investors who are usually coming into the deal with an entity, an LLC or something like that. So you're doing Reg Bs on the syndication. This chunk was golden. All right. Anything else you want to add to this part of it? This was the deep dive on the deal, the best deal you ever did. The diamonds, the dogs, the cash flow for the comps, the one appraisal, partial releases. You unpack the JVs, you unpack the syndication. There was a lot in this, John.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I would add is I think you asked this before about like finding the deals. Like, I mean, we find a lot of deals off MLS, and they're just poorly marketed, or it's a guy selling a 4 unit, and we get to know the agent, and we find out that hey, this guy's looking to sell 10 more buildings after this. Like a lot of times, it's just I don't spend anything on marketing. I don't do much for mailers. I don't do much for those types of things. It's all about connections and using the agents to kind of push our agenda. Everyone knows what we want to buy, and it's just a matter of trying to find where things line up. But we bought plenty of these portfolios off of MLS because they're marketed wrong, or people don't understand the value because hey, this thing doesn't produce any cash flow, and we're looking at it as all right, so we can buy it off cash flow, but what is it worth when I break it down? And if I have that delta, then I don't care that it doesn't make cash flow because that just means I can buy it for cheaper.
And then, wow.
It's like we buy a lot of dogs off of KW Commercial or MLS because like they're out there, people see them, but like we've just gotten in the habit of looking the sum of the parts instead of the sum of the whole.
That is so counterintuitive to way some investors think, right? So some investors might find this portfolio and say, okay, that's all nice and fluffy, but I only want the diamonds. I don't want to buy the dogs. You're looking at it totally backwards, saying, okay, the dogs are great because they're going to increase the equity in the diamonds after I strip these out of the deal. So the dogs are okay.
Give me the crap with the good stuff, right? I'll figure out which is which afterwards. I don't want you to tell me because you're gonna lie to me anyways.
That never happens in real estate, right? Wow, wow, wow. All right, so we're moving right along here. I'm really enjoying this. I feel like I've been talking to you for 5 minutes here, but I'm soaking in so much. So now we're gonna get down, and most of the times the answer to this is some book that's covered in purple. But in your investing career, has there been a book that's had the biggest impact on you as a real estate investor?
There is. And it actually might surprise you. Rich Dad Poor Dad. No.
Didn't see it coming.
No, actually, the book that made a big difference for me, and I read it. It's a great book, but the book that made a big difference for me was 4 Hour Work Week.
Oh
by
yeah,
Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that one, it's not a real estate book, but it's an entrepreneur book. But there's that book gave me the courage to quit my W-2, and that was game changing for me. And so there's an exercise in that book where it says you're reading this book because there's something you're looking to do. That's why you picked up this book. So I want you to step away from this book. Exactly. It's a big book, but there's one exercise in it that frankly changed my life. And it's think about all the bad things that could happen if you do what you're thinking of doing and write it all out. What's the worst case scenario? You live on your mom's couch. You have to get a job at McDonald's. Like, you quit your job, you can't go back. What's the worst possible thing that could happen to you? And then it's like, all right, now be realistic, right? If you're leaving finance, you can get another job in finance. If like, there's probably, it's not going to be as bad as you think it is. But even if it is, you're still better off than most of the people in this world. And now it's like, okay, now think of the best case scenario if what you're trying works out. And think about that for a while. Write it down. What can you achieve if the best case scenario plays out? So the worst case scenario isn't that bad. The best case scenario is life-changing. Chances are you're going to be somewhere in the middle. So stop being scared and just go freaking do it.
Like, best case scenario could be I look to my left and there's the Caribbean.
There you go. That's pretty good.
For those of you who didn't see it, this is the actual book. And of all my books on the shelf, this is going to be real easy to do. It is the most highlighted book I own. I put tabs in where all the highlights are. And, something really crazy about this book, right? When the 4 Hour Work Week came out and it was like this big trending thing, COVID didn't happen yet. And Tim Ferriss goes into all these strategies in this book, like approach your boss this way to, entice him to let you work 1 day a week from home and be super productive so you can show him that it works, and then get him to do 2 and then get him to do 3. And, it was a struggle back before COVID to actually cross this bridge with an employer. And now there's so many people that I meet all the time, even here on the island. It's like, no, I work domestically in the States from here. And we do the same thing. We got a tribe of 11 people, and we've got Bel Air East, Bel Air West, Bel Air South, and we run it all from here. Yeah, my life is a series of one-way plane tickets, but I'm okay. I mean, I'm happy with the results. So yeah, Tim Ferriss, 4 Hour Work Week. And still a lot of great stuff in here, because he digs down on where to find suppliers to do these types of things and this type of business and that type of business. So many stories in there. All right. Now, was there a second book as your real estate investing career that had an impact on you?
I mean, there's a bunch. I mean, Rich Dad Poor Dad certainly was a great book. I like that one a lot. I think another one was I read all the Bigger Pockets ones, and actually one of the ones that always kind of stuck with me, and I still give them to people when they come into my office, is oh geez, I'm gonna forget the name of it.
It's the white one with the blue text. Investing in real estate properties. I think that's.
I'm gonna forget the name of it, but it's the one by Scott Trench about really like your first house hacking. I think it's like A Simple Life. Set for Life is the name of the book.
Life, Scott.
And Set for Life. It's a really good entry level book. It came out of when he was doing the podcast for the Money Show. And it's got a lot of the messaging around financial independence from Mr. Money Mustache and early retirement extreme kind of paired with real estate. And it's one of those things where it's like, and it kind of breaks it down is don't do the the $5 lattes. Go have the $5 latte if it makes you happy. That's not going to have an impact on your life. 50% of your income goes to housing, 30% of it goes to transportation. If you solve those two things, you can do whatever the heck you want with your disposable income. So don't focus on the little stuff. Focus on the big stuff. And if you solve that early and you don't have to think about it again, you're set for life. Go have the expensive lattes if it makes you happy. That's not going to matter. Like, obviously, if you overdo it, you overdo it. But if you can solve your housing, the portion of your income that's set aside for housing, you make a big difference in your financial well-being. It's a really easy book. It's a really simple book, but it just kind of dives into like, would you rather save $11 on Starbucks, which makes you happy, or $15 on bringing your lunch to work instead of going out with your friends and colleagues and having a good time? Or would you rather save $2,000 a month on your housing?
Oh yeah. There's that
really hard, stuck every day, and the other one's gonna be really hard for 3 to 6 months, and you're gonna thank everybody when it's all done.
Yeah, you said it was housing and transportation, right? Those are big. Okay. So for us, transportation down here is a non-issue because everything is 15 minutes away. I imported my car down here, so I own that free and clear. I think we fill the tank once a month. And then travel is actually all deduction anyways. So that whole thing, I think, is eliminated, or a fraction of what's normal. I mean, you mentioned driving or commuting 3 hours on the train, 6 hours a day. That's 30 hours a week commuting. I can get a lot of work done in 30 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then the housing, if you're house hacking, that makes so much sense. And I got to say, I do enjoy my lattes every morning, but I make my own ghetto blend. So, wow, those are some good books. So that was the first time we ever got Set for Life on there. 4-hour work week has popped up once before. So we're almost to the close of this, and I'm having so much fun. I really want to thank you. You've been beyond a wealth of knowledge here, and it's just been such like a normal flowing conversation. So what's next for the Bombaci team at Candor Realty, and why not get started today? What's on the future?
Yeah, so I mean, we're working on expanding into Maine, so that's probably a big thing for us in 2024, and we're looking to grow. So I think right now we've got about 75 million under management. We're looking to add about 50 million in 2024. We're being pretty tight about the underwriting, because I still think that's a lot of bad deals out there. We put in a lot of offers in 2023, but we just like everyone else with the interest rates, it's been hard to find decent deals. We haven't closed on anything substantial in probably about 6 months. So 2024 is meant to be like a growth year for us. And that's what we're hoping to accomplish. Expanding into Maine, growing a little bit from there, and they're really focusing on the acquisitions, buying those portfolio type projects and cutting them up, and then kind of being stuck with the winners is the goal.
Wow. What was that book? Field of Diamonds. I think it was, I can't remember the story from the book. What it was, a farmer in Africa. Everyone was finding diamonds, so he sold his farm in search for diamonds. And then after the rest of his life not finding diamonds, ended up jumping off a bridge and drowning. And then the farmer who bought his farm one day, going through a stream, found the shiny rock, put it on his mantle. A friend came over admiring the rock. He said, yeah, I just found that in the stream here on my farm. He says, that's the biggest, largest uncut diamond I've ever seen in my life. He says, well, that's funny because the stream is filled with these. So, your you're ditching the dogs, keeping the diamonds. The whole story of that was like, don't go out looking to like Tahiti for your diamonds. You're standing right in central Massachusetts. If I have it correct, you're in Massachusetts, you're in New Hampshire, and now you're going into Maine. Am I missing anything?
Nope, that's it. We did one project in Maine last year as like a test case. It was a 56 unit portfolio in Lewiston, Maine. We're just exiting that portfolio now, learned a lot and kind of confirmed that we can do this in Maine. And so we're looking to grow up into southern Maine. But we stay close to home. If I can't drive to the properties, I don't go to them. If I don't know the area, someone has to convince me. I'm trying, people are trying to convince us to go down to Florida. People are trying to convince us to go to other areas. I'm open to other areas, but the talk track is you have to prove to me that you know it better than the guy next door who I looked at the portfolio, and we just haven't gotten there yet. I see it all the time. I'm sure you do too. Is like in markets that we know, Lowell or Fitchburg or Leominster, you see a deal trade and you say, "Oh my God, I can't believe someone bought that pile of crap." Like because we've known about it forever. And then you find out it's an out-of-state investor. And my fear is that if you're sitting at a poker game, you don't know who the patsy is.
Right.
You're the patsy. And if and so if I'm going out of my market, I'm afraid that I'm the patsy unless I know what's going on. And so we've been very, very protective about growth unless I know it's a good deal. I know some of the market that can confirm my suspicions or deny my suspicions. And that's kind of prevented us from going too far, too fast. But we've found plenty of work to do in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and southern Maine. So there's plenty of stuff out there.
So I have a question to unpack those markets because I know Master in the Law 186 subsection 15B. I can wake up in my sleep from a nightmare quoting that statute. So I'm comfortable in Massachusetts because I know how to navigate that law and manage a property. But for someone coming into one of your investments, or even you in your own experience buying portfolios in these, if you had to rate Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine, what would be friendliest to least friendliest tenant landlord laws?
So the way I explain it to people is all three of those are tenant friendly. If you screw up as a landlord in all three of those states, you are going to get crucified in public court. Like that's just the way it works.
Fair.
If you do things right and you follow the law, and if you make a mistake, you own up to it quickly and offer amends, you're going to be okay in all three of those states. Massachusetts is going to drag you through the mud longer.
Mm-hmm.
Maine is second, but Maine is only second because the judges are frankly there's not enough of them for the amount of cases that they hear, and so it just takes a long time to get court dates in Maine. And New Hampshire is the friendliest, but again, if you screw up in all three of those states, they're going to make you pay. None of them are landlord friendly. It's just probably Massachusetts is more landlord friendly than the other three, or more tenant friendly than the other three. And the biggest difference between Mass and New Hampshire is the example I give is we had two evictions going through, one in Mass, one in New Hampshire. Both of them, the day before the court case, the residents got COVID. That sucks. They weren't able to go to court, so we extended to another court date. In New Hampshire, we had another court date in 2 weeks. In Massachusetts, we had another court date in 4 weeks. In New Hampshire, the day of the reappointment court case, the resident got in a car crash on the way to the eviction hearing and wasn't able to attend. And the judge says, all right, this is the second time they didn't show up in my court. Unless they produce a letter from the hospital saying that they were admitted, I'm going to default them and rule in favor of the landlord. In Massachusetts, that same tenant had COVID a second time and wasn't able to make the court date. And the judge said, oh my God, these poor people, they had COVID twice in a month. We're going to need to extend, and we'll have another court date in 4 weeks.
Hmm.
And that's probably the biggest difference is they're both tenant friendly. They're both going to give the tenant the benefit of the doubt. But in New Hampshire, at a certain point, they say, prove it. In Massachusetts, they say, oh my God, can't catch a break. Not only are they dealing with this awful landlord that showed up twice in my court, but like they got COVID twice. Like that is a rough stick for that person.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we've seen in the past 3 or 4 months, we've had more evictions than we've had in the past 5 years.
And I feel like in Mass they're finally getting tired of it. At least that's what I'm seeing. Is I feel like the judges are kind of tired of it. Like they feel like, I feel like we're getting more responses, we're getting more answers. They're like, I think they've grown tired of the system in a lot of regards. And we show up with all of our paperwork. I'm sure you guys do too, because we're used to it. And like we've been having very good success in Massachusetts and New Hampshire recently, because I just think that they're getting tired of it.
I think it was 2 Fridays ago, we had 5 cases. We were actually half of the docket. And I'm not going to say which case or anything like that, but the housing specialists were coming right out at the roll call, the docket call, saying, look, we're going to be out of here in 2 hours. If you can't wrap up your stuff within 2 hours, then we're going to move you to a trial date. And that's it. So they're like, they want you in and out, in and out, in and out, make an arrangement, make an agreement, do your arbitration. If you can't reach it quickly, they want you out the door. I don't know what's going on, what the state of the state is, how they feel about that. Maybe they're understaffed. I don't know. I know there's been a lot of judges moving around. They've actually called judges out of retirement. I was shocked to hear that Judge Sullivan came out of retirement. I love Judge Sullivan. I wish he would come out to Leominster, but that ain't going to happen. I've known Judge Sullivan a long time. And yeah, the whole point is what I used to know was set in stone. This is how you do an eviction, has been in flux since COVID. It's like changing every couple months, and you have to be on it. So I want to thank you for, doing a little apples to orange to pineapple on Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts there. And I guess that's anywhere. In Texas, I think you can knock on the door, shoot, and then put their stuff on the sidewalk. Not really. Well, I think you shoot, then knock, or I don't have it right, but I know there's a firearm somewhere.
Yeah, we don't get that in New England. Yeah.
No, not ever. So this has been a wonderful show. One last question. What is the question on this show I did not ask you that I should have asked you?
I'm not sure. I mean, maybe biggest lesson learned. Like a failure, I guess, might be like the one thing that we didn't really talk about. And I mean, I guess the answer to that question would be whenever we have a problem, I try to find someone else to solve it, because it's probably something that's a weakness for mine. And so that's kind of the way that we've grown, and we've split up more companies where we have a construction management company, because we had a heck of a time managing subs during COVID. We couldn't find anyone to freaking do anything. Couldn't keep track of it, couldn't stay on budget, couldn't do anything. And so it got to the point where I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm not good enough at this. We either need to stop doing construction, which is impossible in our industry, or we need to bring this in-house and give it to someone that's competent at this, because I can't do that. And that's probably like where it goes, is when I have a failure either on the leasing side or on the construction side or on the management side. I try to put someone in place to solve it, because most of the time it's just not something that I'm good at. And I try to recognize that I can't be good at everything. And I feel like that's part of the problem in our industry, is that so often people try to be everything to everybody. And it just takes the issue and makes it more broadened within your portfolio, where if you stay in it too long, you're never going to be able to solve it unless you change something. And most of the time, part of the problem is the person managing it. And that's why I like buying properties off of landlords that are retiring, because a lot of times the biggest problem with the properties is the landlord. By taking that person out of operations, we solve half the problem. And I realized that a lot of times I'm that problem within my own network.
Kind of like the analogy you did, if you're going into a market, if you don't know who the chump is at the table, it's probably you, right?
Probably me.
So
I don't know what
I'm glad I asked that question, because I'm going through the notes here, And there's supposed to be a question, what is the biggest challenge you've ever had as a real estate investor? So I'm glad that I asked that question because you kind of resurrected that question. I'm going to have to update this list. It's not on there anymore.
Okay.
I guess I'm the chump at the table on that one. I love your laugh, John. So
Thank you.
this has been absolutely wonderful. Believe it or not, but we're an hour and a half on this show. Can you imagine?
Jeez, yeah, it went by quick. It was fun. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
I love doing these shows. They're so much fun. I learned so much, and thank you for giving so much. So last thing I have for you here is, if anyone from our show is interested in getting in touch with you, an investor, or wants to buy a property, where do you want people to look for you? How should they find you? How do you want them to contact you?
Yes, I mean the easiest way is email. I think you can share that. You can also find me on social media. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, and then we host 8 free meetups in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and now Maine. And I know Brian. I think you've been a guest speaker on our virtual meetup from Aruba, and so that's the easiest place to find me. I actually have a virtual meetup tonight. I have it the first Thursday of every month. If you ever want to track me down, I'm always at those meetups, and that's a great place to meet me in person.
I'm going to ask you offline to send me the email you want, the website you want them to use, your social media links. I'll put all that in here on the little subtitles, and I'll be happy to run a list at the end of it of all the different events that you handle. Because I would jump on a plane to hit some of these events, and I've said that before. Actually, Andrew is going to be guest presenter at the Northern Worcester County Landlord Association January 11th. And that's my association, right? So I moved up my flight one day earlier just so I could be there for Andrew, and I definitely want to hear him again. Can't wait to see him.
Oh wow. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think we have our virtual our Lowell meetup on the same day, the 11th. So unfortunately, probably won't be able to make there. But if you're in town, let me know. We can get together.
Well, when you send me that list, I'll start looking at my travel schedule. And if I can be there in person, I'd love to do that because, Island is nice, but these conversations are so valuable to me, even though it's Zoom. Being in a room with folks like yourself, my people, my blood, that it just invigorates me so much. John, I cannot thank you enough. This has been absolutely wonderful. I have learned so much. So I want to thank you personally for just sharing so much wealth of information on the show. Anything else you want to share with our listeners before we sign off?
No, I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun. This was great. And if you ever need anything, please feel free to reach out. I'm always an open book.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jon Bombaci of Candor Realty Group. This is Brian Lucier from the Why Not Real Estate Podcast signing off. We'll see you on the next one.